Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville politics, government, news, business, really whatever gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com. Joined, as always, by Scott Barker, also co-founder and co-publisher of Compass. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing just fine. It feels like autumn.
It does.
For once this year.
We were sort of like stuck in early September, it felt like there, and now suddenly it's November.
And it feels good. It's fall is always my favorite time of year, and glad it's finally here. Better late than never.
Yeah, my parents moved to Knoxville this year from upstate New York, and for the last couple of months, they kind of keep asking me, is this normal? Is this normal for October? Is this normal for November? And I kind of keep saying, not exactly, although, who knows? Maybe it is from now on. We don't know that.
Yeah, it's one of the things. I mean, weather here's always been a little bit, wonky, you don't know what to expect. I remember one year growing up, it was in the 70s, the week of Christmas.
Sure.
And so, but certainly in recent years, it's been, you can pretty much count on it being a lot warmer in October.
I have friends who had bumper crops of tomatoes in October.
Yeah. It's
a little unusual.
Yes.
All right. Well, we are not here to talk about the weather. We are also not here to talk about elections. This will be the first episode in I don't know how long that we're not going to talk about elections, either past elections, future elections. This week this is a no election zone. We are getting back to the nitty-gritty of the local governments that we cover. And by nitty-gritty, we mean things like taxes, property, debt, and, Scott, parking. So we're going to talk about all of those to one degree or another this week. Also want to mention the new Planned Parenthood facility on Cherry Street reopened. We'll mention that. And the reaction on County Commission to Commissioner Rhonda Lee's Protecting the Innocence of Children resolution. We will talk about that. But yes, Scott, first, parking, downtown Knoxville. What's going on?
Boy, downtown Knoxville parking, you just have to mention it and people will just go off on it one way or another. People have a lot of opinions about it. It's a very hot topic of just about anybody who has any dealings downtown, whether you live downtown, you work downtown, or you just go downtown to go to eat or go to a concert or something like that. Everybody always talking about it. Well, one thing is the city has decided they need to upgrade parking. They need to modernize how we go about parking downtown. They had a study that came out earlier this year that had a whole bunch of recommendations that really send a lot of people into a tizzy because there were so many recommendations on so many things. Of course, this is a lot, as with most studies, it's a study for, the government and the administration, cherry picked what they wanted out of it. They didn't, obviously weren't going to get all of it. But anyway, they unveiled the parking proposal that they want to initiate. Some things, there are going to be big changes in some aspects, especially if for people who park on the street.
Or people who try to park on the street, because there are not very many street parking spaces downtown.
There are not. There are only 538 out of a total downtown parking inventory of more than 6,700. So there are more than 6,000 other spaces other than that. But if you do park on the street, things will change. And then if you park in garages, not so much. So and that's one of the big things that, ever since the downtown Renaissance began in the early 2000s, what they went to free parking on nights and weekends in city parking garages, and actually on city on metered spaces on the street. And people got real used to that free parking, and they really wanted to keep it. And the city is keeping it. So
right, and that was a departure from the study, right? Because the study recommended charging some kind of nominal fee even for nights and weekends. And there was a lot of pushback to that from downtown business owners and other people.
Oh, yes. Yes, there was. But they decided to keep the free parking at nights and weekends. A couple little changes. First of all, Market Square Garage, which is the most used garage downtown, on Saturdays during the day, you'll have to pay a $3 flat fee. It's not going to be, you won't be charged by the hour, just a flat $3 fee. That's for Saturday afternoons on all nights through the week, and on Sunday during the day, it's going to be free. But
and then the other garages will just stay free nights and weekends the way they have been.
The other garages will stay free nights and weekends. There's one other change though that many people will see. I will notice this one. One of the things is the way that they're currently set up. If you go and park, say late afternoon, and you stay beyond the 6 o'clock free time period, you can leave and not pay at all.
Because they just raise, what happens is like around 7 o'clock, or I think it's 8 o'clock at the Market Square Garage, those gates just go up.
Yeah.
So if your car is in there past that, you can just leave no matter. I mean, you might have parked there at 9 in the morning that day,
right.
But if you're still there when those gates go up, you can just leave without paying anything.
Right. And that ends. What they're going to do is they're going to have those gates down all the time. You'll have to go in and out. But if you park there, let's say you go down at noon. The cutoff time is supposed to be 6. So you leave at 8 or 9. For whatever reason that you're down there all day, who cares? It's your business. But if you're there, you go down at noon and you stay till 8 or 9. You will still have to pay for the time that you're in the garage from noon to 6. You don't have to pay for the time beyond 6, but up till 6 you will have to pay. So there will be, that'll be a change for some people. If you go downtown for happy hour and then dinner and then wander around and maybe go to the Tennessee Theater or something like that. If you go down for happy hour and you show up at 5 o'clock, well, from 5 to 6 you're going to have to pay, but from then on it'll be free.
So basically, when I worked at the city, this was something that we were very aware of, that people used the parking garages this way, partly because a lot of us did it too. I have certainly done this, parked in the afternoon and then stayed downtown and thought, oh, well, I will admit, there have been times where I've thought, should I go home or maybe grab a drink somewhere? And if you do the math, it's like, well, if I go home now and say it's like at 6:30 when the gates were still down, I'm going to have to pay for the last 4 hours of parking. That's like $4. Or I could go spend $3 and get a happy hour drink somewhere and bide my time till that gate goes up. I save money on the parking. I get a nice little drink. Those are the kinds of calculations that some number of I'm not even going to call them scofflaws because I think it's just taking advantage of the system that exists. But this has been a known effect by the city government for a long time, so they're clamping down on it. On
a less fun note, I mean, one of the things that we cover meetings, city council meetings begin at 6. I would go down and usually I would park the Main Street garage, park at 5 or 5:30. And then the meeting would go till 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then come back out and leave and not pay. So, But anyway, so that's enough about garages. Well, the big change is going to be on street parking. As we said, it's not many spaces, but they're important. And one of the things right now, you have a meter. You go to the meter, you pump in quarters like people have been doing for bunches and bunches of years. In fact, weird aside real quick, former News Sentinel editor Jack McElroy recently published a book about the guy who invented the parking meter. He was also a newspaper editor.
Interesting.
In New Mexico. Anyway, but you pay your coins. In recent years, you've been able to use your card, a credit card or a debit card. You won't be able to do that anymore. No cash, no cards, no payment whatsoever except for mobile pay. You will have to download an app from a company called Park Mobile. You will you have to put in your driver information. You have to initiate whatever spot you're in. I don't know how they're going to identify the spots. Some of that's some of the really nitty gritty details I'm a little unclear on. But then you identify the spot, put in how long you're going to be there, and you get out and you go and you do whatever it is you want to do. And then when you come back out, you close out your session and leave, and you pay through the app, not at the meter. And that's the only way to pay, and that will, I'm sure, it's going to confuse a lot of people who aren't up to snuff on what they're going to be doing, and but that's a huge change. Also the rates are going to go up slightly. Right now it's $1.50 for 2-hour lots will be $2
at the meter
on
the street parking.
Yeah. 2-hour spaces on the on street parking.
Yeah.
But also one of the things that this does is one of the things that this is doing is it's going to enable them to upgrade technology, and all this. A lot of this will be automated. Obviously, checking in and checking out of your parking space will be automated. Enforcement will be automated as well. The Public Building Authority does the downtown enforcement. Their enforcement officers will have a device, and they'll, if you're expired, they can check to see if you're expired. It wouldn't surprise me if they get notified if you're of a space that is overstated its pay. But they will go and they can put in a license tag. The citation goes automatically to city court. It is automatically filed in there, and that helps city court with collections. Supposedly, they'll be easier.
Will they still put an actual ticket on your car so that you've been ticketed?
I did not ask that question. I do not know.
Just curious,
probably
because at some level you're going to have to be notified.
Yeah, well,
you're in violation.
I would imagine so, but they're wanting to automate it as much as possible. Now one thing too, and if you do get one of those citations, those are going to go up. Most parking citations are $10 to $15 now. They're going to go up to $25. One thing that people are saying, people, immediately go to, oh, that's just a money grab for the city. They're going to just wanting to. Well, all of the money that derives from parking downtown goes right back into parking downtown. I mean, that's what's going to pay for these technology upgrades. That's what's going to whenever they do maintenance on garages, it comes out of this fund. It's what's called an enterprise fund. It's supposed to be self-sustaining. Parking is not, but it is supposed to. That's the goal, is to bring in as much revenue from parking as it costs to provide the parking, and that's gonna be there. On the plus side about having those apps is when it comes to enforcement, let's say you go somewhere and get a space for 2 hours. You're at a restaurant eating dinner with friends or lunch, whatever, and it's 2 hours hits and you're 4 or 5 blocks away from your car. You can just re-up your time on your phone. You don't have to run to the meter and feed at quarters. You can just do it there. So that'll be that. Anyway, there are lots of other little things that are involved here. One is downtown businesses that use valet parking. The spaces that they use on the street, where you pull in and give your car to the valet, and then they go park it in a garage somewhere. Well, this doesn't affect the garage thing, but it affects the on-street spaces that the valet service uses. Those, the study found that Knoxville lags way behind other cities in doing this. Knoxville currently charges businesses $250 a year. That is going to rise gradually over. There are going to be some pretty steep increases, but it's still going to be in steps up to $5,000 a year.
Wow, yeah, that's a pretty big increase.
Yeah. And that it's in line with what they charge in Chattanooga, Nashville, Greenville.
Well, it's based on what that street space could produce if it were in normal use, right?
Right. And currently it's pennies a day, and parking space, in downtown generates a lot more than just a few pennies a day. So it's still pretty cheap, I think, on a yearly basis compared to, I don't recall off the top of my head what it is at $5,000 a year, but it's not. You can do the math, but it's not much compared to what it could bring in routinely used and turnover and everything else. One of the things that they're hoping that the on-street parking changes will do is to increase that turnover in parking spaces. That's what the businesses downtown really want. They want turnover in spaces so that more customers can come in and
the ideal that I have heard said before about street parking is that you want to try to set the parking rates at a level where on any given block there's always an open space, so that at any given time, if somebody's driving down Gay Street and they just want to park somewhere to run into a store or maybe grab a cup of coffee or whatever they're doing, that there will be a space for them, but the level is set high enough that they're not going to stay there longer than they need to, and then they will move on and keep that space open for the next person.
Right. And it's funny, and it's going to be more expensive to park there too. Cheryl Ball, who's the chief policy officer for the city, told city council members at a recent workshop that the consultants told them that they need to treat on-street parking as beachfront parking. That's where you park on the beach. Okay, that's that's the premium.
Right. Prime real estate.
Yes, absolutely. And so now there, city council members at their workshop did have, some concerns. Probably the biggest concern is people who work downtown, especially in the hospitality industry, which, the pay's fairly low. And parking is at a premium always. One of the things is there are a few 10-hour spaces at the edges of downtown, like down on Central. Those will go away. The maximum is going to be 4 hours. A lot of downtown workers would use those spaces.
And the price is going up too, right? Because those are right now, I think, 30 cents an hour, and they're going up to $1
Yeah, they're going up to $1 an hour.
Yeah.
So, they use that. There are other spaces that weren't included in this that are free on street that people have used down on Willow near the stadium. The stadium parking is not addressed in this. They're going to address that hopefully before opening day of the baseball season in 2025. And it also doesn't include the parking spaces that are underneath the Interstate 40, which a lot of those are all free. So there is a lot of concern about employees because it's expensive to live downtown. It's expensive to park downtown. So how do people who work downtown get to work and keep downtown booming? So one of the things the city is doing is they're working with the Downtown Knoxville Alliance to kind of come up with some plan, program, however you want to put it, to make sure that people who work downtown can get to their jobs.
The other couple of concerns that I've seen raised, like on social media, the biggest one has to do with the parking app, and just what you were saying, that it might be confusing to some people. I mean, there is a decent chunk of our population, and that chunk gets bigger, I think, the older people get, but say especially people maybe over 70 or so, who have not really necessarily adapted or adopted the world of digital everything. I know my own parents, when I took them to the TDOT office to get them Tennessee driver's licenses, so much of setting an appointment there was contingent on having a smartphone that you could use to access and check in and whatever. Like, we got to the office and there was no physical way to check in. It said you had to go to the app on your phone. Well, my parents didn't have that. I think there are a lot of people for whom, even if they figure out that, I'm supposed to use an app to do this, they're not used to doing that. There's also the question of, like, what if you're able to do that, but you don't happen to have good cell service, like downtown or whatever. Like, not all of our cell phone providers offer great service downtown. So it seems to me that there are some potential, that might make it not just more expensive for people to park, but it might make it practically impossible for some people to park on the street.
Well, it will. I mean, I'm a Luddite anyway. I'm not 100% bought into downloading an app for everything and all, and I don't want to if I put all those apps on my phone, I won't be able to find any of them anyway. But the kind of the response is go to a garage.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have an app, you don't want to use an app, go to a garage, and that's essentially the response. They say it a lot nicer than I just did, but
right.
They say you can still pay by cash and pay with a card downtown in the garage, and it's covered, and all that stuff. So, but that's there are other problems with using apps too, like for visitors from out of town. They come, they might have, even if they have mobile pay at where they come from, it might be with a different vendor,
right?
And they don't have this app.
Yeah.
And they have to download this app and put in all their information, all that stuff that you got to do to sign up for an app. And and so that's why there's going to be some growing pains for sure. At the very least, when they launch this, they're planning to launch it in February. So,
and this is something that, I mean, I guess there might be a couple little ordinance changes council has to do, but mostly these are all policy decisions that the city administration can just make on their own, right?
Most of them are things like the citation charges, citation fees. Those have to be approved by city council.
Mm-hmm.
As far as just the parking fees, the administration can do those.
They don't force city council to vote on that. I'm sure city council appreciates that.
I'm sure they do. But there are some other things, the technology upgrade contracts, things like that will have to go through city council. But as far as most of the policy things, no, they are. There's another. It's a little wrinkle, and they don't do it a lot. It's like on towing. If you park downtown and you leave your car downtown on, let's say, on a street, an on-street parking space, and you this would be for you young folk. If you go and you park there and you go to a drinking establishment, you hook up with a bunch of friends and decide to go to Atlanta for a concert the next night, and you just leave your car on the street. Stays on the street for a day or two. PBA guys are going to go about there. They're going to write you a ticket, probably more than one. And then if it looks like you just kind of abandoned your car there, you can have it towed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, under the current ordinance, the PBA officers have to call a KPD officer to come and be present while the tow truck comes and hooks up and takes your car. Well, I mean, the PBA enforcement officers are certified to enforce public traffic laws. So, there's no real, the theory goes there's no real reason that a KPD officer has to be pulled off of street patrol to go stand by a car in downtown Knoxville waiting for a tow truck to just watch a tow truck pick it up. So the PBA enforcement officers would have the authority to just call a tow truck and it would come and pick them up, and no KPD involvement at all. And that would have to be changed in ordinance. I mean, there's some things like that there's some language that has to deal with the on-street parking where they talk about metered parking. Well, it's not really going to be technically going to be metered anymore, so they're going to have to change the language a little bit. There's some things like that, but the policy, the overarching policies, the administration can just make those changes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I guess if you do park downtown, now you know what's coming. If you have thoughts about it, of course, you can communicate those with the city administration for whatever good it might do you.
Yeah, that's they
are not going to be shocked if people are upset about this, because people get upset anytime there's a change in parking.
Yes, they get upset when there's not a change in parking. I mean, parking, like I said at the outset, parking is a passionate issue when it comes to people who, as they say, live, work, and play downtown.
Well, City Council did take action on something this week, not related to parking, but related to visiting, including visiting downtown. And that is a change in the city's hotel-motel tax. And Scott, obviously, this is something that will primarily not affect people who live here in Knoxville, Knox County, unless you're somebody who, occasionally books a room downtown for a weekend or something like that. But it's mostly going to be paid by out-of-town visitors who pay it's actually the occupancy tax, the room occupancy tax. So what's the city doing there?
Well, the city has proposed, and council gave approval on first reading last week, an increase in the hotel motel tax from $3 to $4. So it'll be a $1 increase. which isn't
That's
much
per room per night.
per room per night.
Mm-hmm.
The average hotel rate in Knoxville is $117 a night. That includes the nights and that's over the course of a year. So it includes UT football weekends where they're real high. It includes middle of the winter months when it's down low. It includes business rates during the week, and which are higher than weekend rates. So you jumble all that stuff together, shake it all up. It's $117 a night. So it's a $1.70 increase in the tax. So
right, So it's going from it's currently 3%, is going to 4%,
right.
And then the other change that they made is how that money can be spent, right?
Right, and that's the big deal. That's what the city is really focusing on. There are two big deals, but that's the biggest deal. Currently the hotel motel tax can only be spent on relieving the convention center debt. Period. Nothing else. It can't go to the general fund. It can't be spent on any other facilities. It can only go to the convention center debt. This ordinance change would allow the city to spend those revenues on other tourism-related things.
Right, because I think under state
law, a hotel motel tax has to be spent on tourism-related activities. Right. So, but in the city's ordinance is even narrower. It's just on the convention center. But this will allow the city to spend money on other facilities. And the administration says this is really important because things like the Civic Coliseum is older than I am.
Yeah.
It was built in 1961. And it was, it's an old building, needs maintenance all the time, things like that. Civic Auditorium needs a lot of work too. World's Fair Park can use some upgrades, especially the amphitheater. You've got the Volunteer Landing starting to show its age. All these tourism related facilities can use some upgrades. So this would raise revenue that would go to those types of projects. And
the convention center is due to be paid off in 2032, right? So at that point, all of this money could go to wherever else it's
that's needed. The other important part of this of this ordinance change. Under the current ordinance, when the convention center is paid off, the hotel motel tax goes away. Mm-hmm. It's a sunset provision. I mean, it just ends. And so, and there's some concern that, the state legislature might do something like tell you can't create a new tax or you can't, new hotel motel tax, anything like that. So what this does is it also eliminates that sunset clause out of the ordinance, so that when the convention center is paid off in 2032, is when it's scheduled to be paid off. The tax will stay in place, and all of that revenue will go toward maintenance and other tourism related things. I mean, if they build if there's a new tourism related project that comes along that the city would want to help fund, they could go to that. Whatever.
So I got a question. I'm going to interrupt quick. So can they use this to pay their portion of the stadium project, or is that already written into the stadium project payment program? Because they're on the hook for $500,000 a year, $600,000 a year. The city
theoretically.
Is?
We don't actually know.
We don't know.
They have to make up half of the difference with the county of whatever its shortfall is. But could they use this for that?
I would imagine so.
Has anybody talked about that? I feel like that would be
No, I mean, definitely Knox County is already planning to pay its portion of the downtown stadium from its hotel motel taxes. So clearly that is, at least as far as the county's concerned, an allowable use of that kind of funding. So presumably the city could do that if that's where they want that money to come from.
Yeah, they could, but what their stated purpose is a bigger deal to them is right now is the Coliseum. The Coliseum's falling apart. The Ice Bears had to cancel a game last year in order to because of the
the chiller, wasn't it?
The chiller,
under the floor.
went out, and it's kind of hard to play hockey on carpet or the framework for the rink.
And honestly, the convention center, right, that'll be paid off in 2032, but it'll also be 30 years old in 2032. And so the convention center itself is going to need ongoing maintenance and spending.
Yeah. So, I mean, theoretically they could, that's not their intended or stated purpose anyway, of doing that.
Sure. There's a difference in the words intended and stated.
That's
I agree.
true.
Well, I guess, the Civic has been a pet project of mine for years. Like, I think that's one of the city infrastructure things that has needed a lot more attention.
Yeah, there's been smaller improvements to it at different points, but it definitely. Last time I was in there might have been during Big Ears earlier this year in the auditorium, and definitely I noticed there were some aspects of that facility, the men's room, that could use some upgrades for sure.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long ago that there was talk about building a new arena instead of the Civic Coliseum. The Coliseum has some big drawbacks. One of the things is their big tenant is the Ice Bears.
Yeah,
and the Ice Bears, by the way, are big advocates of passage of this. The co-owner was down at city council saying, "Yeah, rah."
Yeah, the Ice Bears were advocating for a whole new arena.
Yeah,
but that was going to cost at that point, and this is a while ago now, but upwards of $150 million. I'm sure it'd be much more than that now. And there was not a lot of appetite for that at the time.
Yeah, but even so, the one of the things is the rink that the Ice Bears play on smaller than it should be. Than the typical professional hockey rink. So there's some real limitations to that building, and who knows, they might in 2032 they might decide to build a replacement for the Civic Coliseum, and they still have the revenue to pay for the debt service if they do that. So
right, and so that passed council, does it need a second reading?
It needs a second reading, which will be not this week, but next week.
Mm-hmm. But no controversy or anything.
No. It passed. There wasn't.
The people who are paying this are mostly people who don't live in Knoxville.
That's true.
It makes it an easy sell.
Like you said, the people who pay this are people who, let's say, spend New Year's Eve downtown, and they get a hotel room to do that. Or they have a wedding and a family will, get a block of hotel rooms, for the wedding party, or a business where the Knoxville based business will get a block of rooms for people who travel in from out of town that they pay for, not the, other than that. And that's of the market, that's probably a pretty small amount. But primarily the people who are going to pay for this live out of town, don't even know that don't even know what the hotel motel tax is in Knoxville is.
I have to admit, and maybe I'm just a careless traveler, but like when I go somewhere, you go online, you pick out your hotel room that meets your budget or where you want to be or whatever. You sign on to the rate, it's $122 a night, and then you go to check out and it's like $137.50, and you're just like, okay, fine. And some of that is some of it is sales tax, some of it's a state tax, some of it's a local tax. You're just like, whatever. You just you're already spending the money for the room. Those extra couple of bucks just kind of
you go, oh wow, they charge a lot of taxes here. Should have thought of that before.
Never coming back.
Yeah, never coming back. Well, no, they don't do that.
Yeah,
everybody charges taxes like this. It's not
right, exactly.
It's not been a concert ticket. There's always going to be fees on it.
Yeah,
on top of it,
for sure. All right. Well, let's see. Shifting gears to talk a little bit about Knox County government. County Commission had a couple of meetings this past Monday. They had a finance committee meeting where they got updates on county finances. And they also had their monthly agenda review session where they talked through items that are on the agenda for their monthly voting meeting. That voting meeting is this Monday, November 18th. They had the agenda review session last Monday. And the item that got the most discussion and attention on that agenda is one that we talked about a little bit last week, which is Commissioner Rhonda Lee's resolution to protect the innocence of children. And this is sort of a slight revision of a resolution that she brought last year in the fall of 2023 with essentially the same aim. And what it does is it says, first of all, it puts county commissions strongly on the record against sexualizing children. It does not really define what it means by sexualizing children, but it's kind of like, well, everybody agrees. Whatever you mean by that doesn't sound good. We're against it. Okay. What it then says is that no county funding can go to any agency, organization, program, or activity that engages in sexualizing children. Well, that gets a little more complicated because if you're talking about withholding funds, you have to actually define what would constitute a violation of this resolution so that the people who might be affected by it could try to figure out whether they're somehow going to be affected by it. And so when Lee brought this in 2023, there was a lot of skepticism on county commission. The county law department said that it was probably going to be a First Amendment violation. It was going to raise all sorts of constitutional and legal issues. And several other members of county commission basically felt like this was attempting to bring culture war issues into the arena of county commission that was not really the proper arena for them, and that it was kind of a bit of political grandstanding by Lee, and more than that by conservative consultant Eric Wyatter, who ran Lee's campaign in 2022 and who was the author of last year's resolution. This year's resolution also came to county commission from Lee, but when she sent it into the agenda committee, she basically forwarded an email from Wyatter. So this is coming from Eric Wyatter. We've talked about Eric Wyatter a lot. We just talked about him last week as kind of this, sort of insurgent Trumpian force in the local Republican Party. There's a lot of local Republicans who don't like Wyatter for various reasons. One of them is that he does things like this. He's kind of constantly trying to find ways to put people on the defensive, including other Republicans, to make other Republicans look bad. There's a lot of speculation, supposition out there that what Wyatter is really trying to do with these kinds of resolutions is get people to vote against something so that then if he runs a candidate against somebody, say in a Republican primary, he can say, candidate so-and-so refused to protect the children of Knox County. So there's a lot of skepticism and a fair amount of cynicism on commission about this. Now, I think the reason it got tabled last year on a 10-1 vote. There was just no interest in this on county commission last year. I think the reason she's bringing it back is that Wyatter got two more candidates elected to county commission this year, Andy Fox and Angela Russell. And so there's some thought, and they have, Fox, Russell, and Rhonda Lee have already become a little bit of a voting bloc on commission. And so the assumption is that Lee figured she can at least get a little bit more support than she did last year. That did seem true during the discussion. The only commissioner who said anything favorable about this resolution during the discussion was Andy Fox. But other commissioners, both Democrats and Republicans, just raised all sorts of questions about it and just kind of basically said, why? What are you doing here? Obviously we don't support the sexualization of children. No existing or past county programs, services, or anything have ever sexualized children. County Commissioner Larson J. asked the county law department, county law director David Book and deputy law director Mike Moyers, who between the two of them have literal decades of experience in the county law department. He said, in your recollection, has Knox County government ever supported anything that contributed to the sexualization of children? Have we ever supported anything that, was legally obscene, anything like that? And both Book and Moyer said just no, absolutely not. And what Moyer said was, I guarantee you if we were down here funding obscenity, we would hear about it from the Attorney General's office, that's just not something that we do. Now, what Lee said was, no, she thinks there have been things. And so the interesting thing about this is that Lee insists that this is not aimed at anyone in particular. But even in saying that, she sort of gave away the game, because she said this isn't aimed at any group or sexual orientation. Specifically, she said that, not aimed at any group or sexual orientation. Well, why did she throw sexual orientation in there? Because from the beginning, this has all been assumed to be aimed at anything to do with LGBTQ people. That was the assumption last year when it was brought. This year, she says, no, it's not. But when asked to give examples of anything that she thought might have crossed this line in the past, she said, well, the Tennessee Theater, which gets a little bit of funding every year from Knox County, hosted a drag show. Well, IAMS Nature Center, which gets some money from Knox County, planned to host a drag show that then they canceled because there was an outcry from religious conservatives on social media about it. But they were planning to have a drag show. And Visit Knoxville, which gets a good chunk of the county's hotel motel tax, is a sponsor of the Pride Festival. Okay, so all of her examples is not aimed at anybody, but literally everything she can think of has to do with LGBTQ people. None of the things she's talking about were illegal. None of them violated any laws. The drag show at the Tennessee Theater, there were police officers there, not because they thought something illegal was going to happen at the show, but because there had been so much controversy stirred up by some local Christian nationalist groups against it, and Proud Boys who demonstrated on the street against it. But anyway, officers were in the room there. The Pride Parade that happens downtown, there are police there. Nothing illegal is happening at these. And when Lee and some of the sort of religious conservatives who come to county commission periodically to talk about these things, when they talk about these events, they'll show pictures, and they show pictures of like drag queens dancing. It's like, well, that's a picture of a person dancing. What they don't like is that it's a person in drag, that it's, somebody dressed as another gender. That is not obscene. And that's actually been verified just recently in sort of upholding the law that the state passed about drag performances last year. The 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals said very clearly that law does not have any effect on anybody who's just having a drag show. That the drag show would have to actually be obscene, would have to have nudity, would have to have, explicit sexual content. That's what obscenity is.
Drag shows in and of themselves
not obscene. And that's just something that sort of like Lee and the Christian conservative cohort that keeps kind of trying to raise these issues, they basically refuse to acknowledge that. They just say that, well, these are obscene, but for whatever reason, our woke police officers aren't enforcing what we clearly know is obscene. But like, they're just wrong. Like, these things are not obscene. They're legal definitions of obscenity that these events just absolutely, the Pride Parade is not obscene. It just doesn't in any way reach a legal definition of obscenity. So that's what Moyers means when he says that nothing that Knox County, never mind that also Knox County didn't support any of those things. Knox County provides a little bit of money to the Tennessee Theater to do free community programming, not to host drag shows. They provide money to IAMS Nature Center to, further the outdoor recreation mission of IAMS Nature Center. Even if IAMS had hosted a drag show, no county funding would have gone to it. And, Commission Chair Gina Oster said that she had talked to Kim Bumpus at Visit Knoxville about sponsoring the Pride Festival. And Kim Bumpus said, that was at the request of the city of Knoxville, which also funds Visit Knoxville. It's funded by both the city and the county. Yeah. And, Visit Knoxville gave like $1,000 to support the Pride Festival at the behest of the city, out of the city funding.
And to be clear, the Knoxville Pride Festival is a regional event, so there are people who do come from outside of Knox County.
Yeah, it's a legitimate tourist draw.
It's a little legitimate tourism.
For sure, I'm sure some people probably book hotels and pay the hotel motel tax downtown so they can go to the Pride Festival. It's one of the larger Pride festivals in the Southeast, and as anybody knows who has gone to the Pride Festival, it's basically just it's a party it's a parade and a party in the park, and there's like vendors, and yes, there are some drag performances, but again, those are just people in dresses and makeup dancing, lip syncing. Anyway, There was not, once again, there didn't seem to be a lot of appetite on commission for this. Commission will vote on this resolution at its meeting on Monday. We'll see if Lee wins over anybody else there. But this is kind of an early test of, this kind of new block that is now more than just Lee on commission, whether they are going to have much success trying to pursue these kind of culture war issues. So we'll see how that works out. But the indications at last Monday's discussion were just that there were a lot of people on commission who are just like, we already have plenty of laws protecting children, restricting obscenity. If anybody thinks there's been a violation of a law, they can go ahead and report that to the district attorney.
Yeah.
If you think the Pride Parade is obscene, call Sharm Allen's office and say, have you guys looked at this and see what happens, but that most commissioners didn't feel like this was something that county commission needed to really delve further into. The other interesting discussion that happened out of those meetings was during the finance committee meeting. Commissioner Larson Jay, who is the chair of the finance committee and is also running for county mayor in 2026. And so you kind of have to see anything Jay says or does at this point within that context as well. He put forward a presentation that he had put together with the county finance department, just looking at the county's overall financial circumstance. We talked about this earlier in the year, but I think he was just really trying to hammer this home. The county has a growing debt problem. Their annual payments on their existing debt last year was about $76 million. They have a couple of older pieces of debt that are coming due in the next few years. And so by 2029, that number is expected to go up to like $101 million a year in annual payments. Their current budget is just about, I think it's $1.08 billion this year. So, they're creeping up toward 10% of their annual budget just being debt service. And they currently have a debt service fund because in recent years, more money has been dedicated to debt service than has actually needed to be paid. So they've built up some reserves there. But that reserve fund is essentially going to be depleted by 2029, which means any new amounts that have to go toward debt are going to have to come from other places in the budget. The county already has a very tight budget. We've talked about this too. And so anything else that they have to put toward debt is going to come out of services that are already pretty constrained because they don't have a lot of money to spend. And Jay did not advocate for any particular solution to this, but there was discussion about, sort of what are the options. Mm-hmm. And they only have a couple of revenue sources. I mean, the county has three primary revenue sources. They have local sales taxes, local property taxes, and state funding. The vast majority of state funding they get is dedicated to the school system through the education funding formula. So that's just kind of out of their control. The majority of sales taxes also go to the school system under both state law and local ordinances. And even if the county wanted to raise its sales tax rate, they don't have a lot of room to do it. Under state law, it could be bumped another 0.5 cent per dollar, which would take it from 9.25 cents as it is right now up to 9.75 cents. But that would have to be adopted by a referendum. Voters would have to approve it. And Chris Caldwell, the county's chief financial officer, said by the time you back out, the half of that has to go to schools, and then also any dollars spent within the city of Knoxville or the town of Farragut, the local sales taxes from those go to those governments. They don't go to the county general fund. The county gets no part of those except for the part that goes to schools. The county might net about an extra $9 million a year from doing this. Which is not nothing, but again, on $1 billion budget with the kinds of infrastructure and debt pictures that they're looking at, like $9 million a year is not a whole lot, especially when you consider everything they would have to go through with the referendum and everything just to even get to that. Now, it would help the schools for sure, but if your interest is in like the county general fund that they use to do things like pave roads, like it's not going to be a tremendous help. So that leaves property taxes. That's their other big pool. Nobody, including Jay, is out there right now saying, oh, we need to raise property taxes. But Jay did note, and we've talked about this before too, the county has not raised its property tax rate since 1999. and that rate has fallen because of subsequent countywide reassessments. It's fallen by more than 50%, because it was $3.23 in 1999 and is $1.55 right now. And so basically it has not kept up with inflation in any way. And it has really conscribed what the county is able to afford to do. Jay used the example of, as the county's been kind of stuck at this flat level of property taxes and a decreasing property tax rate, everything else that they do has gotten more expensive. So he used the example of a ton of asphalt, which has increased from, I think it was like $24, $25 a ton in 2001 to like $122 a ton now, especially after the recent rounds of inflation we've gone through. And what the result of that is that this year the county is paving 36 miles of road lane. The county is responsible for maintaining about 2,000 miles of road lane. Mm-hmm. And Jay said that in a good, healthy, forward-looking formula would be to be basically repaving 10% of your road lanes a year. So that would be 200 miles. They're doing 36. They have about an 80-year backlog of road work and infrastructure that they want to get to. So again, Jay, he was just presenting this for information. He didn't end it by saying, and that's why I think we ought to do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. But he is running for mayor, and so I think we can I think what Jay is trying to do is create a rhetorical environment heading into the next mayoral election where it might be difficult for candidates to do as they have done in the recent past, to just say, I don't think we need to change anything. Our growth will take care of our needs, which has been sort of like the baseline, when County Mayor Glenn Jacobs was running, before him, County Mayor Tim Burchett, before him, County Mayor Mike Ragsdale. That was kind of like our growth will take care of it. We don't need to raise taxes. We don't need to do anything. And I think what Jay is trying to do is maybe set the table for a little more candid conversation about the state of county finances.
In many ways, that growth masked things. It didn't really take care of things. It, and I think that's, that's one of the things that yes, all of those county mayors said, well, we don't need to raise taxes because, our growth will take care of everything. Well, that growth hasn't taken care of paving. It hasn't taken care of very many new roads. I mean, we've got Shad Road, which is a big project and has opened up a lot more area for development. That's going to drive a lot more. But that whole, when I cover the Planning Commission, and every single subdivision that gets that the rezoning gets done for a subdivision. Or their plans for a subdivision, every single one of them, the people who live nearby talk about the inadequate roads, and so it's almost a given that, in fact, to stop a subdivision, you've got to have more than just the roads are inadequate in order to convince the planning commissioners that it's that they need to reject a rezoning request or something like that. I mean, it's really that has it's touted a lot often as fiscal responsibility, but what it's done really is just kind of mask this the shortcomings of that. And yeah, I mean, what was the of Tennessee's 95 counties?
Yeah, Knox County's property tax rate now, because of not having an increase in 25 years, we now rank 78th out of 95 counties. Yeah. We are of the 10 counties with the largest populations. We are in terms of tax rate, we are number 10 by a significant amount. Now, There are a lot of people who would say, well, that's great. Our taxes are low.
Yeah.
And if that's your only metric, then sure. Like if your only goal is to live in a county with low taxes, like Knox County is accomplishing that. But if your goal is to live in a county that has adequate resources to take a growing county that has adequate resources to take care of its increasing needs, and I think that this is the argument Jay is obviously making, then like we're not in a position to do that right now. And like you're saying, like growth does build overall the property tax base, but it also builds the universe of needs and demands on the existing public resources, whether those are roads or schools or parks or all of the other things we expect local government to provide. So,
well, it's like saying that, I barely pay any income tax at all. Well, it's because I'm poor. I don't make anything.
Right.
I need to make more money.
A low tax bill in and of itself is just a data point. It doesn't necessarily tell you a lot about where you are. All right. Well, I'm sure there will be more talk about that over the coming years ahead of the. Darn! I said we weren't going to talk about elections ahead of the 2026 election. We won't talk about elections.
Like a proper politician, you lied about it. I get it.
It's just it's hard to keep them out of our conversation here. All right, Scott. Another thing that happened this week over in East Knoxville, Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi reopened they opened a new facility at the space that their old facility was until it was burned down in an arson attack about 3 years ago. So what's going on there?
Well, the new facility's open, and it's they had a ribbon cutting celebration the other day, last week. Lots changed since then. We have the abortion ban in. It's not a they aren't abortion providers anymore.
At least in Tennessee.
Yeah. And I'm talking about this particular clinic.
Yeah.
But they do a lot of other health services. They do all kinds of women's health screenings and various things. They provide birth control. They are also helping Tennessee women find places where they can go to have legal abortions. And so, but there's plenty of work for them to do, and they're very much determined to keep that open. Now, it would have been very easy for them just to walk away from Knoxville when was it New Year's Eve in 2021 when the arsonist burned down the building.
Yeah.
So, but that is it's a milestone for the organization locally.
And just for those who don't remember how all of that played out, the Justice Department did eventually come out and say that they had determined who they believe committed that arson, and it was a guy named Mark Reno. But by the time they announced that, he had actually died while he was in custody. He had a medical event. I don't remember if it was a heart attack or what. Yeah. And he was in custody for another crime, another attack on a federal building, the Duncan building downtown here. And he was a sort of far right anti-government activist who they believe he was also the one who had committed an earlier attack at that Planned Parenthood clinic, firing a shotgun through the door. It was at a time when nobody was there, so nobody was hurt. But they believe he then came back and did burn it down. He had been at the January 6th insurrection riot at the U.S. Capitol in 2021. And so he was somebody who was on their radar. He was in custody, and they had determined and were going to charge him with this arson of the Planned Parenthood building as well, but he died while he was in custody. So that is not an unsolved crime, and it was verified that it was, this was, not to put too fine a point on it, an act of political terrorism. That's exactly what this was. Planned Parenthood has rebuilt and reopened, and Ashley Caulfield, who's the CEO of Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi, kind of made a strong statement at the ribbon cutting this past week saying, we are not going anywhere. We are here, and we're here to serve the community. And there are, of course, a lot of people on the right for whom even the name Planned Parenthood is sort of like a dirty word, and they will certainly not be happy that the agency continues to operate in the state, even though they can no longer provide abortions here. But they seem pretty determined to be there, and they do have political support as well. Knoxville Mayor India Kincannon, State Rep Gloria Johnson, City Councilwoman Debbie Helsley all came out to the opening there, along with some other local officials. So obviously, it's a divisive organization, I guess, in some people's minds, but they are committed to Knoxville. Yeah,
of course, a lot of opponents of Planned Parenthood are, and will say, oh well, when people talk about how they're doing these other medical services and all, the opponents will say, well, yeah, but that all goes to support their providing abortions. So if they provide abortions anywhere, then their locations everywhere are suspect.
Right.
And it's interesting. I mean, I think that a lot of people have been watching to see, how Planned Parenthood is able to carry on in areas where abortion is illegal, and this indicates that they can at least reopen their clinic and see patients and provide services, and they've shown some resiliency in being able to do that.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, the other thing we wanted to talk about was another interesting property in Knoxville, and that is the home of the former St. Mary's Hospital in North Knoxville. And of course, that whole complex, the city acquired it after the hospital shut down, and they've redeveloped portions of it for the new public safety complex there, sort of off of Woodland Avenue in North Knoxville. And then there was a tower that was bought by Lincoln Memorial University that they are using. But there's a couple of other pieces of the property, including the one that holds what's left of the historic old hospital building. And that came to Planning Commission this week for sort of the next steps and what's going to happen there.
Yeah, everything that's happened on the property so far, all the redevelopment that's happened, has been on the southern end of it. On the northern end of it is in the middle is where the 1930 circa original hospital building stands, and then beyond that there's some more green space. That area will be the plan is to have a developer come in and redevelop that, and the ideal for the city is for a developer to come in and renovate, restore, reuse the original hospital building, and they will have to build other housing or some kind of development up there as well on the green areas in order to be able to do that, because it's going to be a real expensive project. I mean, almost, if it was just that building, it would be prohibitively expensive. There's no way that anybody would be able to do that and make money,
because the building's very old, and also hospital buildings are not necessarily easily adapted to other uses because they're not built to be apartments or whatever.
Right. So what happened last week was now KCDC, the city's redevelopment agency, has that property. It's about a 6-acre. The property where the hospital itself is there's about a 6 acre band across or strip across the campus there, and they went to planning commission to have that rezoned for multifamily development, and it's the maximum multifamily development, so they can, there aren't going to be very many restrictions on what you can do there, but and it's for that the hospital and space next to it. The other section toward the north end will be rezoned at a later date, but the goal is to have all of that property together and put out for an RFP, request for proposals, to see if a developer can come in and put up a plan that would help preserve the building, revitalize the property, and obviously would have to make the developer a little money. So
and probably provide more housing to help.
Well, that was the
housing needs.
The public goal is to provide more housing. There's a lot of room up there. You can put a lot of housing.
I mean, we're probably talking about apartment buildings or townhomes or some kind of fairly dense multi-unit housing up there. Yes,
there's space where the hospital building is. There's space next to it, on the kind of to the west. That you could put a good sized apartment building there, and there aren't really you could put a lot of apartments there. We're talking about you could probably put a couple of thousand buildings in that whole area, buildings with a couple of thousand units. And that doesn't even include the hospital, what they end up doing with that. So, but there wasn't any real pushback on it at all. The planning commissioners are I think enthusiastic about having that property redeveloped. It now goes to city council. It should easily pass there as well.
And I think the local neighborhood there, Oakwood Lincoln Park, where I live, some residents initially had questions about it, but they ended up being supportive of the project.
Yeah. I think the neighborhood pretty much is the, I think a lot of people in the neighborhood do want to see some preservation of green space up there, and there is going to be some, and there already is, kind of the area between the public safety complex and this area where the hospital is, that kind of is a green space that leads to the LMU Tower, and so I know there's a plan to kind of keep that as green space. There may be, and when one of the things that happens in an RFP is you get an RFP and they select a developer to come up with a plan. I mean, the developer kind of submits a concept, then they sit down with KCDC and develop an actual plan, and that will probably include some green space and walking paths and things like that as well. So there'll be that. Yes, now there was one person who came to county commission who's from the neighborhood who wanted mixed use up there, and that's a possibility too. Of course, the people who own businesses and restaurants and stores along Broadway would want all of those new residents to come down there and do their shopping there. But anyway, I think that there is a possibility that this could be a pretty significant residential development, and really, I mean, the way that the property sits, because to get there, you almost always, just about everybody goes from Woodland, from Woodland Avenue, which does not go through Oakwood Lincoln Park, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of
it's at the
kind of the dividing line between
the main corridor.
Yeah, and so that's where. So you're not going to get I mean, you'll get some. Don't get me wrong. There will be some traffic that will come up to the Oakwood part of the neighborhood, but for the most part, it'll come from Woodland and Broadway. And
right, which is already true of the traffic going into the public safety complex.
Yes.
That's all coming up off of Woodland.
And it was true when the hospital was there.
Yeah, right.
Right,
and that is a thing to keep in mind, is that the neighborhood is already pretty accustomed to having a big institution up on that hill that had a lot of traffic coming and going.
Yeah.
But most of that traffic did not run through the neighborhood, and that'll continue to be the case, most likely.
Probably so.
All right. Well, let's see. Looking ahead to the coming week, there's not a whole lot on the calendar. That county commission voting meeting that we mentioned earlier, that will happen Monday at 5 o'clock in the main assembly room of the city county building. They will be talking about Commissioner Rhonda Lee's Protecting the Innocence of Children resolution. We are also maybe going to be treated to a presentation by Commissioner Andy Fox. He has promised to bring a presentation outlining his objections to the county accepting apparently any federal grant money at all. They are due to vote to approve the acceptance of some grants for homeless services and some other sort of social service grants that they get every year from the federal government. And Fox is kind of sending an early signal that, according to him anyway, I guess we'll see, but he's saying he's just going to vote against every single one of these because he thinks that the federal government is broke and is borrowing too much money, and the Knox County should not be in the business of encouraging them to do that. County Commissioner Damon Rawls asked him, when Fox mentioned this at last Monday's meeting, Commissioner Rawls asked him, well, okay, if you're against taking this money that fund these services, how do we pay for those services? And Fox's answer more or less was, well, we just shouldn't be doing those anyway. He said that in his view, a lot of homeless people are homeless by choice because they get to be homeless and not have any responsibilities and have the government take care of them. And he's not in favor of that either. So some philosophical differences there, maybe, among county commissioners.
You could say that, yeah.
And we will probably hear some more discussion of that Monday. He said he was going to bring a PowerPoint. So you PowerPoint fans out there, you might want to tune in. Who doesn't love a good PowerPoint presentation?
I'll tell you what. I will be absolutely. It's what absolutely rivets me about PowerPoint presentations is when somebody gives a PowerPoint presentation and they just read off what's written on the screen.
Yeah.
And so hopefully Commissioner Fox won't do that.
You know what I love about PowerPoint presentations is when they can't get it to click to the next screen and they accidentally go back 2 or 3 slides and then have to go back to the one they were at and then accidentally go forward 2 or 3 and have to that's always a fun part of PowerPoint presentations.
Absolutely.
Too.
Absolutely.
All right, so there's that meeting, and then I think not a whole lot else on the agenda right now. Everybody's I think at this point we're starting into the holiday lean.
Yeah.
Scott, we're just a couple of weeks out from Thanksgiving and then Christmas, and so
nobody's geared down yet.
Yeah,
but
and of course up in Washington D.C., nobody's gearing down at all. All sorts of things are happening up there, but we're not here to talk about that. We're just talking about what's happening in Knoxville and Knox County.
Nobody's geared down here yet, but they pulled back off the gas pedal.
Yeah.
So they're getting ready to hit that clutch, gear down one gear.
That's right. Us too. All right. Well, we will be back here next week to talk about those things and anything else that happens between now and then. Thanks as always to Lord Seth Barber for his production work here at Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright. We will talk to you later.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost in Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.